Very nice connection. I hope you agree with me after my talk as well. And what I'm bringing today is an example. It's like an illustration for what you've seen in the previous talks of a system that for most part is pristine. I would say not most part, but 50% of the Amazon is pristine. I spent 20 years working in the Amazon and still work with it my entire career actually. And because the Amazon has this aura of magic and might and power and incredible capacity of handling or affecting the climate and the environment, I think it's a nice, quick example of the force of nature to condition the environment in a way that we can recognize. You've certainly heard about Humboldt, this German naturalist that traveled through South America and other places, I think even Russia, and he did this wonderful work of recovering wonder about nature. You know, Humboldt was the father of meteorology, ecology, physical geography, and he was the first to suggest that plants had a connection with the moisture in the air. So he realized something that native peoples have known all along. If you go to any place where people still keep a connection with nature and have not been spoiled by the sense that we can make our own way and our own environment through technology, etc. Those people who still keep that and prize that, they have this, this knowledge, intuitive knowledge, that we are completely dependent and we rely entirely in the workings of nature and life especially for us to have a comfortable environment to live in. We evolved in this environment thanks to its capacity to keep stability. So I was, not long ago, this year, I was flying from Paris to Saudi Arabia, and I crossed Europe, first France, of course, and then the Alps, and then Greece, and then the ocean, and then the desert, and then got there. And it was a very instructive trip because I sat on the window and I was watching down and thinking about what Paulo spoke here about the Anthropocene. So Europe is a completely human-made landscape, so to speak. And you don't find a single piece of, or at least it's very hard from the airplane perspective, a piece where you see nature at its own, let's say, capacity, as you do in the Amazon and some other places in the planet. So getting this picture from the Amazon is a very nice opportunity for us to see how this system came to be. How it first evolved. It's like a relic, you know, a relic of the natural system designed and evolved over billions of years. You know, trees alone more than 400 million years, and all the workings of the Earth system 4 billion years. You know, the workings that produce this atmosphere we can breathe with oxygen, without toxic gases, and with a climate that's regulated, like Anastasia and Paulo showed, this stability that we enjoy. So the examples I will show here about this mighty forest of the Amazon, that it brings home the message that we depend on nature in general, of course, and forests in particular, to enjoy a livable planet. The first one is the one that had to do just a quick story on our interaction, which started 14 years ago. Victor and Anastasia, and I discovered their workings on the biotic regulation of the environment. I got totally excited about it because I was, since my PhD, I had this incredible interest on Gaia and how Gaia works, so why Earth is different from the neighboring planets, Venus and Mars, who are actually hells, Dante's hells, the two planets, why we are so lucky to be in this planet in between two that didn't work, the life, emergence and development and stability. And so when I found their work, I said, oh, this is great. You know, I heard that Russians don't go to the bathroom without writing an equation. And that was something that eventually I realized that is true, really. Because when we start interacting, the formality and the kindness of them to explain the principles from a physical perspective is so great, because then you start understanding how the laws of nature have to be taken in account if we want to understand nature. And they have done this incredible work of patching us into the understanding. So back then, in the beginning, I was in the midst of questioning about, we had this big project, research project in the Amazon called the LBA, Large Scale Biosphere Atmosphere Experiment in Amazonia. There were more than 1,000 scientists, airplanes, towers, and boats, and experiments, you know, laboratories and models. And we were developing this, trying to measure what Humboldt had suggested, that this 200 years earlier, that this system is incredibly important for the climate. So during the analyzing realms of data from all those instruments and experiments and models, etc., I started questioning how come that during 50 million years, the Amazon forest has kept itself, you know, as this is more or less the state of the knowledge that the Amazon has existed since about 55 million years. And during this time, there was a lot of perturbations, you know, glaciations, eruptions, and changing, you know, massive changes and cataclysmic changes in the old world climate that kept recorded in geological record. And nonetheless, the Amazon was there. So then first evidence that the Amazon was there all along was those paleoclimate studies by Baker from Duke University, where he studied the pollen record in the bottom of Titicaca Lake, which lies in Bolivia, Peru, 4,000 meters high. It's like a collector and a recorder of the wind blowing in the Amazon and bringing pollen from all the plants. So he could look there and see that the Amazon kept for at least 25,000 years the closed canopy covering the area. So this went against a theory, a former theory of the island, that the Amazon was passive, like a sitting duck, waiting for climate to strike. And drought coming, like we have now, a forcing of climate change on the system, then the Amazon would die and retreat to gullies and small islands, and then in the next wet season or time or era, it would spread again and cover the area. That was the prevailing theory before, the bio isolation and fragmentation of the forest resulting from climate. But this results was challenging that. And another evidence came from zoologists who were comparing the fauna, the megafauna, the big animals, between continents like Africa and South America. In Africa you have giraffes, elephants, wild beasts, and all sorts of browsing animals, which require to have grass and type savanna. And in the case of giraffes, they have to have access to the crowns or the canopy, which cannot be too high. So in the Amazon, we have a canopy that's at least 40 meters high. So you could not imagine a giraffe with a 40-meter neck sticking out and trying to reach there. So the fact that these ecological niches of big animals, browsing animals, were not in the Amazon was a suggestion that the Amazon might not have the niche for them to evolve. If you compare other niches, like ant eating, in South America we have one type of, or how to say, philo that produce ant eaters. In Australia is another one, it's porcupines that eat ants. And which basically says, whenever you have a niche, there will be plasticity in the animals and they will sort of adapt to that niche and explore it. But not in South America for browsing animals. In North America you had the buffalo, but not in South America. So another evidence was comparing marsupials from the understory. The marsupial, the same as the Australian kangaroos, but the small ones, it looks like rats with big eyes. And from the Amazon on one hand, and the Atlantic forest, which is almost gone now, but it was a large 1.5 million square kilometers covering all the eastern border of South America. And they found that genetically they were so close, which basically suggested the Amazon and the Atlantic forest were once connected and covered the whole continent. So now you had a suggestion that continuous canopy in South America might have been there for the long haul, like for millions of years. And which basically implied that the Amazon was able to overcome challenges coming from the outside, like climate change. And that this implied as well that then when we start learning from the work of Anastasia and Victor, that the Amazon had the innate capacity to create its own weather, which meaning it had some pumping capacity of sorts. So in order to, I organized this narrative in the sense like, Sherlock Holmes, a detective, and start following clues and cues of a mystery that we do not resolve, and then he start investigating and eventually find it. That's pretty much what scientists do. It's like Sherlock Holmes. We have big magnifying glasses and start following the leads. And in the Amazon, I will give you 3 examples of mysteries that have been solved or at least advanced in understanding, which bring the illustration of how the system works. This is water vapor seen from space with a new instrument. It's called the AIRNS data. It makes an integration of the lower atmosphere, the troposphere, of the water vapor in it. And what you can see is that during daytime, the Amazon is an incredible source of water vapor. It's massive. And this was a mystery, and I tell you why. Because if you think that all the sources of water to land come from the ocean, is the primary and universal, 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by sea. And so as the moisture comes inland and starts precipitating, the air becomes drier and drier if you move inside a big continent. It doesn't happen this way in the small islands, but in a big continent, that's what happened. So if you look to the Amazon data, satellite data of evaporation, you see that doesn't happen. It doesn't dry up as you move inland. It does, as they have shown in places where you don't have forests. But when you have forests, then you have all this incredible upwelling. And the notion of water coming from the ground and into becoming airborne is the one of the geysers. I learned that Czech Republic doesn't have a geyser, right? But you know the notion. If you went to the United States, or if you go to the Yellowstone Park and go to see the Old Faithful, this geyser that's very famous, basically it's saying you get something, it's a phenomena that's bringing water from ground, hitting it somehow, and powerfully ejecting it into the atmosphere. That's what we see from space. That's what's happening in the Amazon, but we don't have geysers in the Amazon. So what is the Amazonian geyser that is able to pump such an enormous amount of moisture into the air? Is this the green geyser or the wooden geysers? The Amazon. A large tree in the Amazon can, with a crown with 20 meters diameter, can pump up to 1,000 liters per day. Okay? For the entire Amazon, we made this calculation, it's like 20 billion tons or 20 trillion liters of water one day. This is more than the Amazon River flow that discharges in the Atlantic, which is responsible for 20% of all river flows in the world. It's like 17 billion tons in the same one day. So you have an upwelling Amazon River of vapor, which is invisible. We don't see water vapor coming off leaves. And as I've learned with Professor Sherlock yesterday, we had a wonderful class that lasted, how many hours we were traveling? And we learned that so many things about the internal workings of trees that we ignored, even we working with the subject. And we came here to learn with Professor Sherlock. Now, if you put in perspective, you who are his students, the amount of work, the geysers, the wooden geysers, and you put in perspective what he's shown in his work, these vessels inside the trunks and the sap movement there, you can quickly realize the kind of technology we have here, built by nature over 50 million years. It's just mind-boggling. Now, the number, he was calculating the number of vessels in one trunk. Imagine 1 hectare, imagine 8,000 square kilometers with 400 billion trees.
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Oh, I'm lost. I am the last one. Okay. Good. I won't feel guilty if I overrun a little bit. Okay. Oh, we are leaving? Okay. So, in 5 minutes. This 20 billion tons of water to get airborne, they need energy, of course, to go from the liquid state to the gaseous state, water vapor. We calculated that if you had to boil this amount of water and you had a giant kettle that you plug in the power, how much energy would you need to evaporate all this water? And it was like 1 year of all electricity used by humans. This is the amount of energy compared to 1 day of evaporation in the Amazon. So just to give you the size of the pump of this 400 billion trees working to cool the planet. Now, because this is all interconnected. So the second mystery, so the first one was clarified, the amount of water coming from the surface in the Amazon directly dependent on the workings, the magical workings of all those trees. And then the second one was, when the first studies of, we're calibrating a satellite that was launched by NASA, it's called TRIM, Tropical Rainfall Measurement Mission. It's a satellite that goes around Earth on the equator, and it passes, it goes one full round of the Earth in every 3 hours. So it has a radar on board that can penetrate clouds and see where the droplets are falling. So it can measure rainfall in real time. And these people start looking to what they nicknamed the Amazon the Green Ocean, because the air was very clean and the clouds were similar to the sea clouds, maritime clouds. And then the mystery, this is the first data of the first 2 years of this satellite, 97, 98. And you can see that over the oceans, there are huge areas that you have no precipitation, like deserts. And over South America, in the same latitude, you have this incredible, rain machine. What is happening there? And the mystery was all the more challenging because, the air over the Amazon was similar to the air over the blue ocean. the green ocean, the blue ocean. So you have two similar kind of system, at least at face value, and they behave completely different. What is the mystery? The mystery was connected to the formation of droplets, condensation and formation of droplets, therefore rain. And you know, when you have an air parcel and there is water vapor in it, if you start cooling it down, eventually it will condensate and produce droplets. However, there is a situation where even with a very cold air, if the air is clean, there is no particulates, it won't start precipitating. It won't start condensating and then therefore precipitating. So the comparison between the two cases led to the studies which finally clarified this thing. Is trees release chemicals like terpenes, isoprenes, or they call the volatile organics, and their smells. You know, we release chemicals as well, and all living beings sort of release gases, and the trees release very special kind of gases that once in the air, with enough sunshine and enough water vapor, and without the pollutants like nitrogen and sulfur gases, they will trick the air to start condensating because they precipitate a very fine dust, which I called pixie dust, because it's a magical process. You don't see this dust. It's very small amount, but very effective. And these are the seeds that produce plentiful of clouds and therefore rainfall, the Garden of Eden, and the watering can. These clouds, they are not too high. They go up to 4 or 5 kilometers. So there is no ice forming inside the clouds. So the clouds are not destructive. They are very friendly. They produce lots of rainfall, which is required for the rainforest to go. And they are also produced in return by the forest itself. So you see a very harmonious, collaborative thing between a living layer here and non-living atmosphere, but coupled and working in harmony. The last mystery, and then I...
Go ahead. Take your time.
Okay.
I apologize, but we have a little bit more time, which I haven't realized because it's 5 minutes and then we have to leave, but we do have even a few...
You don't know what you're doing. You are giving me time. So...
This doesn't mean carte blanche.
Are you feeling comfortable in your seats? And okay, be prepared. Be prepared. Right, fasten your seat belts. Well, okay. So the second mystery, and now the third mystery. There are many mysteries. Some were resolved, and some are still lingering, and we need to solve them. It's a wonderful frontier. But I picked these three because they are interconnected. This one had to do with the fact that if you look in the globe, you see that the deserts, like the Kalahari in Africa, Atacama in South America, Outback in Australia, Sahara in the Northern Hemisphere, and Sonora there, they are lined in a belt. They are lying more or less at 30 degrees north and south. And this is not out of chance. This has a connection with what I think Anastasia has shown on the Hadley circulation. Air rises in the equator and loses moisture there. There's a lot of forest here. And then it's moved to the northern latitude and the southern latitudes in the height, dry air. And it comes down on 30 degrees north and south. Dry air going down tends to favor the formation of dry system or dry land like deserts. So this is all right, but then you go in South America and you find an exception, which is this square here from São Paulo to the Andes, from Cuiabá there to Buenos Aires, is green and is wet. And it lies precisely in the desert belt. How come? This was a mystery. How come? Why is that the case? If you compare, for example, with Africa, you have the Congo, and you have the forest. You have wet wind coming off from the forest, and it goes straight to the Atlantic. And in South America, you have the Andes, right? But how this system is organized? You know, this square here is the richest in South America, the most productive. 70% of the GDP of South America comes from this square here. Industry, agriculture, cities, big cities. So, the explanation. If you compare the flow of water on the landscape with the flow of blood in our bodies, you know, if you say that water in the landscape is like the blood in our body, you could say that rivers on the surface are similar to veins. Veins collect the blood that's been used in the tissues in our body and bring it back to the heart. Where are the arteries that bring fresh blood from the heart lung back to the tissues? Where is it in the landscape scale? Where are the arteries? The arteries are this new concept of a river flying in the sky, which the headwaters are in the blue ocean. The middle course, or the main stretch, in the green ocean, where the pump lies, where the heart lies. And of course, the outlet are the productive land, or the mouth of this river. And this concept of a flying river, of a river of vapor flying in the sky, is a kind of exciting concept that has captured the imagination of people, because we don't see them. We see clouds. We see clouds moving in the sky. But we don't realize that you have this organized sort of, it's not a channel because it's diffuse, but it's organized flow of moisture along very specific places. Because if it were spread out, like we learn in school, evaporation in the ocean, moving of water vapor in land, we should not have deserts, because then you would have vapor going everywhere. But we do have deserts, and we do have wet places. How the wet places are fed with moisture, and that starts to become the explanation. You have all this moisture coming and producing this effect in the Amazon, and producing this river of vapor that, because of the Andes, they are diverted to the southeast and feeding the area that otherwise would be a desert. Okay? So the flying rivers became a heat in a very hot subject because of the connection, and I think I want to tell you this very specially, of business-minded guy, like a friend, Geronimo, the guy who had an airplane, who went twice with a mono-engine airplane around the globe. And then when we met, he said, Antonio, I want to do some project that was nice and important for the environment. And I said, do you have an airplane? Can you make your airplane available? And he said, yeah, sure. I said, why don't you follow the rivers of vapor in the Amazon? He said, what is that? And so in 2 weeks, he had millions from the oil company in Brazil, and started this project. He had the vision of the marketer, you know, the marketing and entrepreneur that scientists usually don't have. And he set up this project that we helped, we collaborated. In 2009, BBC did a nice documentary, I think it's online, on the flying rivers. And in 2010, I gave a TED talk on the subject, which has been very, many people watched. And now the flying rivers, at least there, I don't know here, but the flying rivers became a sort of, a popular concept. It even fed back into the scientific community, because it became a hot topic, everybody valued. So many colleagues start, oh, this is a nice thing to study. And they start, and we had papers coming in Nature and Journal of Climate and others. So the thing here is that you would not have this flying river without the Amazon. Yes, and the thing about the flying rivers, different from the land rivers, is that you can have a negative river. You cannot have a negative river on the surface. A negative river is just an empty channel, right, in the surface. You don't have a dry movement of whatever, known water or crazy thing that will dry its way. But in the air, you can have a dry river that will steal moisture from the surface that is moving along. So if you have a dry mass of air moving over the landscape, it's damaging. That's what brings droughts. And so the flying river is being damaged already, because deforestation in the Amazon, as was shown, is crazy. It's just picking up, it's speeding up. And now we have a process that had been predicted called the savannization by another brother, the oldest, the Nobre Institute. And the savannization is basically saying, beyond a certain threshold or tipping point, the forest will start to die back because it won't have enough moisture to go about. And the chopping of trees that has, 5 minutes, okay. The chopping of trees that has been going on non-stop in the Amazon for the last 40 years. And I give you a figure. You know, if you had a bulldozer with a 3 meters wide blade in front of it, how fast would it have to move to explain the deforestation in the Amazon for the last 40 years? Do you have this idea? Can you imagine? 712 kilometers per hour. It would be a jet bulldozer, non-stop, day and night. This is the destruction. So we had a big drought in São Paulo. You are having a drought in Czech Republic right now, as I understood, for the last few years. There is deforestation going on in Russia that might be connected. We have deforestation in the Amazon, and we have an effect. We have started seeing drought elsewhere. So the take-home and conclusion of this is that we depend on forests for our water. Forget anything else that people say that we can dig a hole and get from the aquifer. If there is no movement of desalinated water over ocean, which that's what clouds over oceans are, desalinated water, into land, land will dry. And trees are these incredible machines and technology that nature developed to allow this to happen. And whenever, even if we don't have tree in an area, we did not know that upstream, as Douglas mentioned, upwind, there was something connected to trees. And I just to quickly, 1 minute, to show this is work by Yadvinder Male from Oxford University. It's fantastic creativity, scientific art. He is showing photosynthesis, which is basically a measure of CO2 being taken by ecosystem. It's a 10 years data, and he made it a movie that is really striking. And this movie is telling you at each time step what this biome is doing. So you see that the deserts, like the Sahara, is disappeared there, collapsed, because there's almost no vegetation there. And the higher latitudes, vegetation like Siberia, etc., during winter they shut off, and during the summer they come alive. But what you see, this is the pump, this is the heartbeat of the biosphere. This is for CO2, of course, but as we saw here today, yeah, the gross GPP, as we call it, gross primary production, it's telling you what the biosphere on land is doing for keeping the earth breathable and moist and comfortable and equilibrated, oscillating but equilibrating. And so the Amazon has an Achilles heel, which is the capacity. You see the deforestation in the Amazon over 40 years is 10 times the size of the Czech Republic. And if you had a guillotine working, it means every minute 2,000 trees are chopped off in the Amazon, non-stop, 40 years. Fire is cremating. Even areas protected, like inside Indian reservations and parks, are now catching fire because it's drying up, all the whole region. Smoke produced by fire are killing rain on the green ocean, which produces further damage. So I just jumped this. I don't have to reinforce what has been said already here. The carpet of Amazon life took tens of millions of years to form. Living beings contain a microcosmos of hidden technology. The abundant living technology found in forests is irreplaceable. We cannot replace it. Okay, thank you.